Welcome back to the series where I explain Vampire the Masquerade clans, also known as classes in other games, to people that probably have never played Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop game for the most part, but there's also a couple of games, video games, that are available on PC, like Bloodlines. That one's a good one. Anyway, today we are gonna be talking about Toreador, and I try to decorate myself the best to my ability, for Toreador is the pretty clan. There are a couple of stories as to how Toreador came into being. I distinctly remember one that just says that Toreador are not cursed. They're just obsessed with beauty from the beginning. That's just something that has happened to them. The Wikipedia page has a story about how first, Toreador was a wonderful painter and a sculptor, and she painted the future of all vampires. She painted the past, the present, and the future. It was a lovely painting, but the original vampire dude, Kane, has seen the painting and has saw the downfall of vampires awaiting them in the future, and he got so angry that he cursed her with being super enamored by her art. And as such, we're going to discuss V20 and V5 editions, which is the most popular editions of Vampire the Masquerade. There's also V1, V2, V3, but we don't talk about those because people don't tend to play those. There are a couple of people that do play those, I am sure, but they're a rare breed. If that's you, then you're awesome. Well done. For everyone else, we're just gonna talk about V20 and V5. So, as you can hear from that story, V20's weakness is that when a Toreador experiences something remarkable, something very beautiful or alluring, they have to roll their self-control, or otherwise they will be stuck, mesmerized by that object, no matter what is happening around them. They can be getting hit, they can be getting murdered, and the only thing that that would cause is another self-control roll. Now, V5 changed it a little bit, so now the bane is that the Toreador has to be surrounded by surroundings that they enjoy and like and find beautiful. Otherwise, they take a dice penalty to their rolls, while their compulsion, which is what happens when you fail your rolls and botch, is obsession over a particular thing or idea or something else that's in the scene that's beautiful, and the only thing that they're gonna be able to do while there is to talk about that thing, to stare at that thing, and engage with that thing and that thing only. Now, mind you, the effect also wears off if somebody forcefully breaks the object, so if your Toreador buddy is ever stuck, remember that you can break the object that they're getting obsessed over. Probably not without any consequences. I imagine they're gonna be very upset with you, but you can definitely do that. Now, as the implication follows, Toreadors are pretty. Toreadors are artists. Toreadors are sculptors. Toreadors are musicians. They're creatives. And their history is that they always followed where the arts were. They would try and get into the most powerful cities, mingle with the most powerful vampires of other clans. If there's two sides that seem to be powerful, they will be playing both sides at the same time. They are where the population is, they are where the beauty is, they are where the painters are, they are where the creatives are. During the Dark Ages, when there was very little of that, they very much immersed themselves into Catholicism and the Catholic Church, for those were the people that were commissioning all the art. So that is where the Toreador wanted to be, to see all the pretty, to experience the pretty, to create the pretty, to buy the pretty painting. You know, the thing that the Toreador do. They like vanity, they like the sparkles, and they themselves would see themselves as this exalted figure that's bringing the beauty to the world and to other vampires, proving that they're not just savages, not just brutes, but a great creative force that drives innovation in both the mortal and the vampire society. Well, that is what Toreadors think about themselves. Anyway, there have been a couple of offshoots. They're a bit weird. Like, there is a cult of Michael, for example. They're calling themselves Nephilim, and they're worshipping a fallen Methuselah Michael. Yeah, the Archangel Michael. That at this point in the plot has died. According to them, he has ascended. The whole thing, though, is that they managed to infuse everybody in the cult with longing for him, like a figure worship sort of thing. But the longing for him also, quote unquote, purifies anyone that's partaking in this cult. And drinking the elder's blood from this cult makes you even more beautiful than you already are, which makes it attractive for clans that are particularly ugly, like Nosferatus, that we were talking about in the previous episode. And obviously, no Toreador is gonna pass on the opportunity to be even more pretty. Toreador anti-tribute. I think I have to actually talk about sects with you first. So there are 3 sects in the game that vampires can subscribe to, and it's big groupings of vampires, okay? It's more like a political affiliation. So there's Camarilla, which is the structured vampire society. Like, you have rulers at the top, and then they have their own cabinet of people, and those people have people underneath them, like whole politics thing. And they control the actions of the people in their territory, which means that if a prince tells you that you're supposed to be doing a mission, or a prince asks you to pay a blood tithe and like bring him some victims or something like that, you're gonna be doing that because you live in the prince's territory. You are under his domain and under his control. If you want to make a new vampire inside the Camarilla, which is, the structured sect, you have to ask for permission from the prince. There are anarchs that are like, screw the rules and screw the police and the rebels. They have established anarch free state in a couple of places, but here's the thing, you still need somebody to, keep the affairs moving and keep everything under control, so they replaced princes with barons. They still have an authority, though they would like you to think that they don't, which is a bit weird. So barons are a bit more lax. You can make new vampires a bit more freely, but you still have to introduce them to the baron, and you still can't really slip up and expose the whole vampire society to people or bring some shit, because barons still carry quite a lot of power, and they can remove you from their territory or remove you from life to begin with. So there's still that's still a power structure. They just feel a bit more free. Then there's Sabbat, which are the savage vampires that revel in their vampiricness. They don't hide from people at all. They believe that they should be in control of people. They see people only as cattle. They do a lot of gruesome stuff, like build houses out of flesh, make flesh monsters out of people, mold their own flesh. They keep the control through very fierce religion. So instead of having princes or barons, they have priests, and priests make the subscribers and followers of the Sabbat path, those vampires, perform rites. There are very strict dates when you have to attend gatherings, and you have to prove yourself by things like jumping over a fire, but there's a lot of more stuff to it. Anyway, it's the savage culty vampires that are also fighting the really old vampires because they believe that the very old vampires are gonna arise and eat their children. And honestly, from the things that have happened, it's not necessarily an unfounded fear. So their sect is in open war, and they try and find these vampires and eat them because, well, more power for them. It makes them stronger, gives them more XP. So it is a thing that they want to do. While in the other two sects, eating another vampire is kind of looked down upon because, well, you don't want to be the cannibal that eats other cannibals. It's kind of bad for the cannibal society, you know? So now that we have covered the sects, Toreadors are mostly Camarilla. And they're pretty high up there. They're considered the high, respectable clan. And they tend to be like right next to the person ruling because they're the pretty one. They're the creative one. They're gonna be there to spread their influence. So oftentimes you will have like a ruler and then you will have a Toreador at their side because that be what they do. Toreador anti-tribu are the Toreador that are in the Sabbat, and they're marked as like their own little subclass, like their own little bloodline, mainly because their weakness changes. Instead of being attracted to pretty things and getting mesmerized by pretty things, they get mesmerized by horrible things like torture and mental torture and anguish and suffering. That is how they differ. But there is a bloodline variance inside the Toreador anti-tribu called Xanthosa. It is Toreadors that come from a ghoul family. A ghoul is like a vampire servant, and if you eventually like feed your ghouls a lot of blood and breed them, the blood kind of inbreeds into the whole bloodline, so you effectively start producing more OP ghouls, and they're called revenants. They're born with the ability to mold flesh, which is called vicissitude, which is an unusual thing for a Toreador to have because Toreadors have auspex, which is the ability to see the unseen and to sense the unseen. So, for example, seeing auras would be auspex. Celerity, which is move fast, and presence, which is, oh, look at me, which really well works very well when, you know, you want to be pretty in the center of attention. So, specifically in the Sabbat, people born, like actually physically born into Xanthosa family, are born with the ability to mold flesh, and if they're made into a Toreador by an embrace, instead of getting celerity, move fast, they keep their ability to mold flesh, making them like a separate little bloodline, just a tiny, teeny smidge of a bloodline that you can play. There are also Vulgaris, which is Toreadors that have learned how to mold flesh into various different shapes of monstrosity while in the Sabbat, and they kind of silently defected back to the Camarilla with like a agreement in the Camarilla. Like they're being hidden. Nobody gets to know about them. They made an agreement with people high up of, hey, we have this awesome thing that we can teach you. And we can also mold your flesh and make you more beautiful. We can effectively, it's like having a plastic surgeon, right? And think of the possibilities in art. And they have auspex, celerity, presence, and vicissitude. So they can see things unseen like auras. They can move fast. Everybody can look at them because they're so awesome. They can just really be the center of attention, and they can mold flesh. Now, mind you, the molding flesh, you would still need to purchase it by the same price mechanically as if it wasn't your clan discipline but you don't need to like find the story teacher or anything for it. So at character creator, if you're the specific type of Toreador, you can buy like that extra ability from the get-go, which is a lot easier because finding vampires that will teach you, a person of a different clan, the abilities that your clan does not have, normally is very hard because everybody's like super holding their own abilities close. So they're not going to share that easily. In this case, you get to effectively buy a fourth ability, which is very powerful, but it's going to cost you more than the rest of your abilities for balancing reasons, I suppose. Now that we have an overview of that, how is Toreador played? Well, most Toreadors are social butterflies, so you would be investing into social more than you wouldn't be investing in your thoughts or your physical prowess. They tend to be very gossipy people. They tend to be very artistic people. They tend to be very theatrical people. You can be a creative, as in your character can be a writer, a poet, a sculptor, a painter, or you can be pretty. Because here's the thing, as much as the clan Toreador tries to only get vampires that would somehow bring substance to the clan, like they're themselves like a great artist, and that warrants bringing them into the clan and making them a vampire, they also can't help but be obsessed by pretty things. So what actually happens is a lot of Toreadors give in to the impulse to make a pretty person immortal, even if they're not actually good at anything, or in any other way relate to the clan. So you can't just be empty and pretty. That's a thing that happens with Toreadors. Toreadors like to throw group gatherings between other Toreadors and themselves. They're normally not very productive, but a lot of Toreadors tend to, well, attend them because it's like a big party and like a chance to show off. That tends to be very favorable and very wanted, especially when every single person in the room wants to be like the center of attention. Toreadors also tends to like organize into guilds, the same way that, you know, in human terms, you would have had like a painter's guild and a sculptor guild. That's still like part of the Toreador, but they're also apparently like slightly divided into like the artistes and the posers, which they kind of call the vapid people that don't bring much to the clan. Both of these names tend to be thrown by Toreadors towards other Toreadors angrily. Like, being called an artiste isn't exactly a good thing either. Being called a poser isn't exactly a good thing either. Apparently, Toreadors really love infighting about what is and isn't art, especially in New Day when, you know, internet came out. Is graffiti art? Is digital art art? Is social media content production art? Those are the kind of things that really get Toreador blood boiling. Now, here's the thing. Toreadors tend to get burnt out. They are very artistic. They tend to suffer the nothing excites me anymore thing a lot more than other clans do as they age. So infighting can be a way to keep the excitement going. Like, nothing changes in your day-to-day, but you have your nemesis, and you're very angry at them, and you both swing insults at each other, and that's like part of their culture, partly because of that. Toreadors will also try to be very, very close to humans, sometimes even like posing as humans, creating families, because they're interested in humanity, they're interested in upcoming trends, they're interested in clothing, in painting, in music, and all that is being made, that is new, that is exciting, until everybody that they know dies, and then that adds to the burnout. It's one of the reasons why Volgire were accepted so with open arms into the Camarilla, because people in the Camarilla, the older Toreadors, they get jaded. It's very hard to find that excitement going after a while, so somebody goes, hey, new way to make art. We can make art by molding flesh. You're like, I'm in. I'm just so totally in. If you can't get access to something new and exciting like that, it isn't too uncommon for Toreadors to slip into rather people vices like drugs. Just like, take blood from a drug user and experience the high, because it makes you feel alive for a while. It makes you feel not jaded. So you could say that while it is the most vapid and empty clan, it's also the most tortured clan, like a tortured artist sort of thing, stuff that they got going on. You can play a Toreador as being very shallow, you can play a Toreador as a tortured artist, you can play a Toreador as a regular artist that maybe is struggling to find their inspiration and is like traveling around for that because it's hard to keep inspired. Or you can play a Toreador that is just like a regular person that happened to be pretty but has like their talents elsewhere. Because once again, while Toreadors try to embrace artists, to like pick up and put artists into their clan, oftentimes they will go on a whim and like make a person into a vampire just because they looked especially beautiful for them that day. And unfortunately, they also abandon their vampires, their progeny, very, very fast. Like, oh, you were so in last week. This week I look at you and you just don't do it for me anymore. So it's time for me to move on. So they leave a lot of people like that. They're one of the clans that spread fairly fast because of it. Therefore, maybe you were like a vet. Maybe you were like a mechanic or a plumber. You just happened to look really good, or at the very least, how the Toreador interpreted looking very good that week. Now you find pretty things to be really fascinating and engaging, and you just can't help but become entranced when you just find beauty in something, but perhaps that is completely influenced by who you were. Maybe your beauty lies in nuts and bolts and pipe types. Maybe the hardware store is just the holy grail of the epitome of what you find to be the most perfection, the most beautiful, the best. You can play a Toreador in many different ways, and that was an example of that. Just like a bit of a crazed mechanic that super into like wrenches and nuts and bolts and pipes, and you're like, oh, this is the most perfect pipe that I have ever seen. And you just got embraced because you looked beautiful. You looked pretty to a Toreador and you caught their fancy. Most of the Toreadors get embraced from the high society ranks and from artists that get patronage from high society people. But not all, because once again, whatever whim strikes a Toreador, they sometimes kind of follow through on it, and that's why Toreadors are one of those clans that spread fairly fast. There are a lot of Toreadors out there, and not all of them are, famous painters and sculptors and tortured artists. There are all sorts. Mainly just because they caught the fancy of a Toreador at that point. They were just super inspired by the wild beauty of their mechanic that came to fix their pipes one day. Or plumber. One of those words. Either way, you can have fun with that. You can put a variety to Toreador. You just have to figure out, why would you have been interesting to an artistic type that seeks beauty in everything? If you can figure that out, you can make a Toreador out of that character. That's kind kind of how it works, and that's about it. So thank you for watching my segment on Toreador. I personally am not super fan of them because playing pretty people or tortured artists is just not super my jam. But I understand. It is a fairly fleshed out clan. There is good reason to love it. What are your opinions on Toreador? Please share them in the comment section down below. And I hope that you enjoyed my makeup. I actually glued some red glitter to my eyeballs. Well, the flap of skin above my eyeballs. Eyelids! I forgot what eyelids were. I am kinda tired. I made 4 videos in a row and read far too much Vampire the Masquerade today. But anyways, I put in special care and attention because the pretty clan, of course. So hopefully this video was enjoyable and you're gonna appreciate it and I get to feel validated like a Toreador being praised on their art or their body. One or the other works. Either one works. It makes the Toreadors feel like they're muses. Great shit. So thank you for watching. More clan videos to come, but also more other videos to come because this is highly a gaming channel that talks about a lot about like regular gaming stuff. And I also talk about occult stuff because that's totally my jam. So if you wanted to subscribe, I suggest just like clicking around and making sure that the rest of my videos are also your vibe so that I'm not spamming your feed with things that you don't like. And if you did subscribe, thank you so much. Number go up, make Mirta happy. What's also making Mirta happy is money given to me by my Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting me, guys, and for letting me make videos like these. Now, hopefully I'm gonna see you in the next video. Toodaloo.